There are serious consequences that should flow from this. Richard Goyder and the board should go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Richard Goyder and the board have been complicit in this illegal sacking of 1,700 workers. On numerous occasions, Richard Goyder has backed in Alan Joyce in relation to this very decision. And we know that Richard Goyder has been complicit in all of the other decisions that are now at the forefront of the community's mind. This has been a spiteful corporate dictatorship, and the board has been right behind Alan Joyce in that spite every step of the way. It's time for them to go. But their last act before they walk out the door should be to rip away from Alan Joyce those obscene bonuses that he has taken as these workers have suffered with their families. The bonuses have to go, the board has to go. And a message for the new CEO, Vanessa Hudson. You owe these workers and their families a deep and sincere apology. These workers have been put through hell, their families have been put through hell. Their lives have been dislocated, some of them forever. Separations, loss of property. That's the consequence of this illegal decision. You need to apologise to these workers straight away. And not just in words, but in actions. And the action that you can take immediately is to hurry back before the federal court now and do everything you can to expedite compensation for these workers so that they can get some justice and some solace for themselves and their families. And we need reform. We need urgent reform. There is a loopholes bill before the federal parliament as we speak. The loopholes bill is designed to close the loophole that Alan Joyce and his management team have opened over a period of 15 years. It is now urgent, not to wait till next year, but urgent right now for the federal parliament to come together quickly and pass those laws so that we don't have other situations of companies sacking and outsourcing workers just for a cheaper buck or for executive bonuses. Finally, we need to make sure that aviation has the public confidence, the community confidence that this critical infrastructure needs. And we need an independent decision maker, a safe and secure skies commission that can make aviation decisions in the community interest and not in the spiteful, illegal profit interests of disgraced CEOs like Alan Joyce. Today is a magnificent victory for these workers. You should hear from them now. I'm going to call on Don.
Thanks, Michael. Well, what a day. It's been 3 years that we've gone through this unnecessary dragging through the mud. We loved Qantas, the people behind me, the workers that stood there, made sure that your airline was the safest in the world. It's not the safest in the world anymore, but let's hope it gets back to there. Before I say another word, I'd like to thank our legal team who had the faith to keep going, even though it was like the unlosable case. The juggernaut of Qantas is not an easy feat. Congratulations to them today. Every one of the thousands of workers that got sacked, we thank you. We were just ordinary ladies and gentlemen going to work. We were no one special. But today, we feel that we're special. Nicely said. I'd also like to thank the TWU under Michael Cain's leadership. Without Michael's guidance, we wouldn't be standing here today. So we are internally grateful to the TWU for standing up for workers' rights mainly, and also believing that he believed from the beginning we could win this case. We had a few doubts, but he certainly proved us wrong. But absolutely a fantastic job by the TWU. Thank you very much. And the other thing today is I'd like to say to the corporate people of Australia, I think the gravy train's pulled into the station. It's time to get off. The corporate governance in this country needs an absolute overhaul. And I'm sure our politicians behind here will make sure that that happens. The other thing too is all you Qantas workers at home, we beat them. Go and enjoy it. Thank you.
Don, can I ask? Oh, sorry.
Senator Tony Sheldon from New South Wales. I just want to, first of all, congratulate the workers for getting this result. As much as there's been a legal team built around and support from across the country, it's those 1,700 families that stood firm to take on one of the most politically and well-resourced companies legally that were determined to turn around and make sure they crushed their spirits, as they tried to do in 2020. Well, today they failed. But where they've succeeded, unfortunately, is that we have 38 different companies that are part of the Joyce loophole that is right across the economy. We see BHP exercising the same bastardry that Alan Joyce hatched all those years ago, where workers are doing the exact same job are getting paid substantially less money. 14 different enterprise agreements for flight attendants, all getting different rates of pay so they can undermine bargaining, undermine wages, and drive up the consequences of cost of living pressures. Because what they're doing is making sure that workers can't get together to deal with the cost of living challenges. I'm going to be very short in this explanation. In 2001, when the collapse of Ansett took place, John Howard turned around and did nothing and stood by Qantas. And Max, one of the Ansett workers, is here today that's also been on the receiving end of Alan Joyce. And he stood firm, and those workers won an employment protection and redundancy for the entire country. In 2011, of course, Alan Joyce locked out the workforce because one of the claims was you wouldn't be able to outsource workers without paying the same rate of pay. 2020, and of course we get hit by COVID, and the Morrison government gave $2.7 billion with no strings attached. And the consequences was 1,700 workers were sacked. Our taxpayers' money. But then also stood by when Virgin collapsed because Qantas got its way. Well, today, the workers have got their way. But to make sure the workers of Australia get their way, we've got to close the Joyce loophole and stop those companies from undermining decent and fair bargaining and negotiated agreements that's happening across the country that's being undermined by the Joyce loophole. It needs to be closed, and the government, the opposition, the crossbenchers and the Parliament of Australia needs to close that loophole. They need to close it as quickly as possible.
Sally McManus, I'm the Secretary of the ACTU. Well, this is a huge win for the workers today. Congratulations to all of the workers at Qantas, to the TWU who took up this case. When you decide to fight Qantas, you know that you've got to throw everything at it because they throw everything at it. It's a real David and Goliath struggle, but it just shows what workers can achieve when they pull together and they join together and they stand up for what's right through their union. Unions will always be there through thick and thin, through the good times and the bad, and this is a great day for working people, great day for the Qantas workers behind me. Of course, the High Court had their particular legal reasons and the things they had to concentrate on in terms of getting to their decision, but the Court of Public Opinion already handed down their decision on Qantas. What we want to see is this. We want to see Qantas restore respect for both their customers and the workforce. Well done to all the workers.
We'll just hear from Max.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Max from South Australia. It's a very important day personally in my life. And behind me, 1,700 workers from everywhere in this beautiful country. As Michael expressed, Tony expressed it before, this situation can be avoided from the first hearing on the Fair Work Commission. Unfortunately, the criminal leadership of Alan Joyce, because that was the word I can express, criminal attitude against the families, against the workforce of the fantastic airline company in Australia. He totally destroyed this company for only for one personal little reason, his little greediness, and became millionaire. He forgot totally what is the values of every single worker of the Transport Worker Union. He was afraid of us, totally, and he tried to destroy us. But once again, I want to say my personal thank to Josh Bones and his lawyer team, Lorraine, Michael, Tony Sheldon, and all the politicians behind them to look after us, telling to the public the truth. Because they already spoke and will be speaking with the truth all the time. Because they never lied to us. And we knew from the beginning, because I was working with QANTAS 20 years, and I personally know how bad and how putrid is the financial situation and greediness of that company. I'm going back to South Australia with my chest high up, looking forward to celebrate with the members. And one more time, I just want to say thank you to the union, and all the workers in this country must to remember, together we stand strong. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Damien from Canberra. It's probably no doubt at some stage I've held your bag and loaded it into a plane. I don't know if anybody else is getting castle vibes here, but this really is a brilliant vibe, isn't it? You know, to have all the fairy tales come through. So the last 3 years has been horrendous for my colleagues and myself. A lot of us have struggled to gain other employment. There's been relationship breakdowns, people that have had to sell their houses, and this is justification and redemption for us today. To come away with a unanimous win. Sorry, I've got a bit of emotion in my voice. A unanimous win. 7 judges of the High Court said, yep, they were in the wrong. As Michael said to me last night, in 2020, it was against culture to speak out against Qantas and what they were doing to their workforce. And now the tables have turned. Everybody knows what they're really like. Everybody knows how they treat their employees. And I implore them now to come back and to engage with the staff that are still there, to try and get them back into a community and get Qantas back to a great airline that it once was. Yes, mate. No, it's okay. Look, lastly, because we've been here a while, I'd love to thank Michael Kane, Tony Sheldon, Sally from the ACTU, and my colleagues who have been outstanding. We're baggage handlers, we're not media people. This is very, very confronting to talk to you guys. I never expected I'd be in Parliament House talking to politicians, but the way my colleagues have stepped up has been commendable. It's been fantastic, and thank you all for coming today and listening to us. Okay. Yep.
You're obviously very emotional, and that's
Yep.
totally fine. But can you just explain to us how losing your job personally affected you?
Can I put the question back to you?
Yeah.
How would you feel? So you were doing a fantastic job in what you're doing, and we were doing a fantastic job, so we thought. And just because there was an ingrained hatred of unionised workforce, that's how they looked for any window of opportunity to get rid of us. And it was soul destroying. It was gut-wrenching. Qantas was a place where people worked for 20, 30, 40 years. And for all of a sudden to be told that you now don't have a job through no fault of your own, sorry, my mobile's going off, it was gut-wrenching, terrible. So, yeah, one thing I would hate for anybody to go through. So,
Michael and Sally, can I just ask, what's your message to the crossbenchers who have reservations about the Industrial Relations Bill as a result of this action now? What's your message to them?
Well, Qantas was one big loophole, and the fact that these workers you've heard from went through all this trauma for all this period of time was because they decided in the beginning to divide their company up into 38 companies. Now, this High Court decision wasn't about that. To stop this type of behaviour in its tracks, you've got to close those loopholes. You will always have a few employers who will do absolutely anything to drive down costs, and that was the regime under Alan Joyce. And so that is why you have to make sure that our workplace rights for workers are doing their job. And they stopped doing their job, and they stopped doing their job well over a decade now. Now, working people have been waiting for a very long time for this to be fixed, and every day it's not fixed is another day that this type of thing could happen for people living through a cost of living crisis, people having more security in their jobs, and employers stopping wage theft makes a huge difference in terms of dealing with a cost of living crisis. So I would just urge all parliamentarians, I would urge the crossbench to understand that Christmas is coming in one of the biggest cost of living crisis we've ever had, and it should be workers that know that they're going into the new year on better footing for once, because it's been far too long that we've waited, and the longer it goes on, the longer working people and their families miss out.
Michael, can I ask you a question? You said you want an apology from the new CEO, Vanessa Hudson. She was there at the time as CFO. She's been at Qantas for over 2 decades. Is an apology enough, or should she also go?
Well, I can understand the Australian community being absolutely sceptical about Vanessa Hudson. She was side by side with Alan Joyce funding them. The decisions that he made, including the illegal one, the big illegal one. And, you know, that is a source of concern. But let's face it, she didn't make those decisions. She was not the decision maker. Alan Joyce was, and the board was. And the board should go. If Vanessa Hudson is to stay around, she's got to turn over a new leaf. She owes these families a deep apology, and she owes them to get into the federal court as quickly as possible and expedite compensation.
Just on what will you be seeking? What will you be seeking in terms of penalties and compensation in the federal court? And Sally, what does it say about the adequacy of fair work protections that the union can win a case like this and the workers still not get their jobs back?
Well, we'll be seeking compensation for these workers. They had jobs ripped away from them illegally. They're entitled to still be in their positions, and therefore they need to be compensated for that. We will seek penalties as well. It is important that there is a clear signal sent to employers in the future that this type of conduct should not occur. There's 1,700 massive breaches, a legal act now, unanimous decision of the High Court. That should be the subject of significant penalties, and we will be seeking them.
How much will send that message?
That's going to be in the matter of that'll be in the hands of the court.
And how soon do you think you can get it back into the federal court?
Well, we're hoping that the federal court will call this on very, very soon, within a matter of days, and that's why we're calling on Vanessa Hudson to respond to that call urgently. Qantas has spent millions and millions of dollars fighting these workers. Now the High Court has said unanimously that their conduct was illegal. They should now send their legal team down as a matter of urgency to quickly settle this matter, get compensation paid.
And how much compensation do you think people could get?
Let me answer this one. One of the most important things about the Closing the Loopholes Bill is it stops this type of behaviour in its tracks. It stops it at its source. The source for Qantas was their ability to be able to outsource in the first place at lower wages, and so that's what the labour hire aspects of this bill is about. If companies have to start considering, first of all, whether they could even do it, obviously they wouldn't be able to. And the other important part of the Closing the Loopholes bill is the ability for things to be resolved quickly and easily in the Fair Work Commission. Where that happens, you don't end up in protracted situations like we have here, all the way to the High Court, because we've had to rely on the court system and because the avenues for workers were very, very weak. Having said that, if there was complete justice in this country, these workers would get their jobs back, and obviously that's not the case. We want to see, though, fair compensation, and we want to see this not happen to anyone else.
Don, can I ask you the impact this sagging had on you, and how much money it will take to make you feel a little bit better about it?
Well, the impact it had on me was, I don't look my age, but I'm 62. You're probably thinking the early 40s, right? So when you ring up for a job and you say, so what have you done? I've been a Qantas baggage handler for the last 20 years, because I was like max 20 years veteran there, and I'm 62. They go, no worries, we'll give you a call. And that's what you get time and time again, because even though we felt that we were specialists in our job, there's no job for a baggage handler outside of the aviation industry. So it was extremely difficult for us to move on, and the knockbacks that you're getting, and where do you go from there? The other thing is how much, well, the federal court, I hope, will give us a fair hearing and have a look of how, for the last 3 years, we've had nothing. It's been a hell of a fight, and I hope that that's reflected in the payment. You know, so one thing that we've done is, through this entire thing, we've had a positive outlook that the courts, through the federal, through the full bench, now to the High Court, will uphold the law. And it looks like it has, and we're very grateful.
One for either Michael or Sally. We've had lots of media reports around the Qantas Chairman's Lounge. It was shown that every member of the High Court has a membership. There's various people in Parliament who have it, almost all of the MPs and senators have it. Do you think that's problematic?
Certainly not in relation to the High Court. These are the most eminent minds by definition in our community. We think that there is absolutely no chance that they have been swayed by membership of the Chairman's Lounge. That said, of course, there is a community discussion about these matters. I think it's a healthy discussion to have. Alan Joyce has used every lever open to him during his tenure, and I think it's really healthy that the community is considering that.
Why not call for the reinstatement of the workers? Wouldn't that be the ultimate form of justice here?
Well, we did do that, of course we did. It was the very first thing we did, but the full federal court ruled against us, and that is the state of it.
What do you make of the process since this was first put to the High Court? Has this moved as smoothly as what you would have liked from your perspective?
Legal process?
Yes, yeah.
Well, the legal process is geared against workers. Workers should not have to go to the High Court or be taken to the High Court to get justice. And that's why it is so critical that the entire federal parliament understands the urgency of the laws that are before them. These laws, if they'd been in place in 2020, would have created a massive disincentive. Qantas would not have had the cost incentive to illegally sack these workers. It wouldn't have happened. And now we need to ensure that it doesn't happen into the future. The best way to do that is for the Parliament to quickly pass these laws that are on the table right now.
Before those laws pass, are there any implications for companies because of this decision before those laws pass?
At the moment, what we need to do is make sure that companies don't have the incentive to reach a deal with their workforce, which they did with these workers, and then renege on that deal and axe and outsource workers to cheaper labour so that they can line executive pockets, which is exactly as what has happened in the Qantas case. The loopholes legislation changes that. What this case shows us is that if worse comes to worse, you can fight and you can have a victory, and it's been a magnificent victory. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.